We are living in deeply transitional times. As an old order gasps its final breath, we're all collectively wondering where this experiment is heading. But what if I told you it's actually all up to you? You have the internal capacity to shape the future as you desire. After all, there's 5 trillion volts of electric potential in your body just waiting to be used. However, genetic conditioning and societal conditioning prevent you from harnessing this potential fully. It's a buffer between the life you are currently aware of and the latent potential that resides inside of you. And it's kind of like there's a gravity of ancestral and societal burden that pulls you towards a certain repetitive process, a self-identity. One that does not exactly feel chosen by you. Instead, it draws you into a disconnected relationship dynamic, an inner world that lacks the clarity to powerfully shape a meaningful direction forward, and the deeper desire to see more beauty emerge as the outer world seems to get harsher and harsher. So, when the facade of an old identity cracks and begins to dissolve away, it's actually a good thing, because now change is ready to happen. And in today's video, I'll show you how this process can begin. Hey, I'm Dave, and this is the Octave Leap channel, where we cover how to reveal your true identity and shift into it. In this video, we're going to cover something that seems obvious and yet goes kind of unspoken in astrological and human design circles. It has to do with accessing the refined version of your true self. So different charts have the potential to pigeonhole you into a limited identity. I know, I have been there. But what I've always been interested in knowing is what is your real identity and how can you actually decode it from a chart? And once you decode it, how do you become it? That is what this video is all about. And if you stick around to the end, you'll get a free reading and even 2 free quantum leaping sessions so you can try this incredible process out for yourself and get started with it today. So let's dive in. But before we do, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the awesome content that I put on this channel that you cannot find anywhere else. Some people are fascinated by the idea of a chart that reveals who you truly are. Others could care less and feel life is meant to be experienced. Finally, there's another group that are just skeptical of most things and feel that this stuff is all vague and just woo-woo. Well, I'm not here to change anyone's opinion, but in my experience, I have found astrological charts and human design body graphs to be very helpful for those that feel that they're intellectually driven. So intellectually driven people need a concept, a blueprint, or a desired identity before they can allow themselves to take action. They rely on inspiration through the intellectual center to give themselves permission to change and need a little bit of advanced inspiration to know what that change can actually look like. So they're not the kind of people that can just operate on faith alone. On the other hand, experiential or somatically oriented people are those who just move from their gut or intuition first and then try to figure things out later. So one is not really better than the other. Anyone who tries to give advice on how you should be is generally speaking from their own experience, and you really need to recognize what works for you. So if anything I say here today doesn't resonate with you, just realize that's perfectly fine. You've got your own alignment, and I truly hope you find it in whatever way that looks like. So I find for myself, and for the people that are attracted to my work, they generally like having a plan or blueprint in place first. This is very helpful. That's always why I've liked using systems as a starting point to investigate myself and my clients deeper. Plus, humans have an inbuilt curiosity, and we really can't help ourselves when there's a quiz to figure out your starseed origin, or your cat avatar, or what famous celebrity you are. But just like all these fun quizzes, not all charts are created equally. And as a result, not all charts will be helpful for you. As you may or may not know, there are many different charts out there that claim to tell you something about yourself. We have Western tropical astrology, Western sidereal astrology, draconic astrology, heliocentric astrology, Jyotish, human design, cosmic human design, gene keys, cosmic gene keys, and even good old numerology. The question I came to ask with all of these different modalities and all these different systems, is it even possible to know your true identity from a chart? And if so, how do you actualize it? How do you make it real in form that you can touch in your life and not just keep it as an intellectual exercise? You see, I've tried a lot of these different systems, from the ones I just outlined before to ones that are even a little bit stranger. This is all in the honest search and pursuit of self-knowledge. And often I did relate kinda to what I encountered, but was usually disappointed overall or in the long run. That's because I felt like I had evolved a lot in my life, and many of these charts were markers of an older version of me. Alternatively, other charts just seemed too abstract and didn't resonate. I'm not saying that they're wrong, because there are people who swear by whatever chart they decide to use based on their own experience. It's just that certain ones didn't fully land for me. And after trying many charts, I can say that there are two systems that I have settled on. The first is the good old tried and tested tropical zodiac. This is the one you find when you go to any astrology site or you just plug in your human design information. If there's no qualification saying it's tropical, it probably is tropical. And this is appropriate for most people in the world because it helps them to provide a foundational level of how they operate in the world. It is very accessible and easy to identify with because it generally reveals a lot of familiar information with a couple tweaks and helpful pointers for blind spots. So it generally agrees with the identity that we've created throughout our lives and what we've done in society, with a couple little, modifications and refinements there. So it's a good stepping stone for people that are just stepping out into awakening, just finding their own individuation in the world. Now, I do give readings using the tropical zodiac for people if that's what they want, and that's where I feel they're at. But I also listen. And what I hear is that these charts work up to a point. I get a lot of people saying, my tropical chart doesn't fully resonate with who I want to become. And that's why I started to go a layer deeper. This brings me to the second chart that I like. The second chart type I use is based on what's called the true sidereal zodiac or true sky zodiac. And the biggest difference here is that this system builds charts based on where planets and stars are actually in the sky. When you look up at the sky at night or you use your astrology app, that is what you see. Believe it or not, that's not the case with the most widely used tropical zodiac system in the West. That's just not what it is. There's a discrepancy between what your eyes are telling you and what the chart is telling you. So I've got other videos on the channel if you want to dive deeper into what the tropical zodiac is, how it relates to the true sidereal, because it does require a detailed discussion on its own, and that would kind of take away from the exciting content that I want to deliver here today. So it sounds like fundamentally this thing we see in the sky should be the thing on our chart, but actually history shows that it's not true. And believe it or not, we've been conditioned to buy in a system that betrays what we see with our very own eyes. So there must be something to this. But the true sidereal corrects this incongruency, and it's only been made available in the past few years as a result of detailed constellation mapping imagery that's allowed us to accurately depict the boundaries of constellations and also know exactly where the stars and planets are in the sky because, they've tried to calculate this historically, and it's always right for a couple centuries, and then it changes. So the true sidereal zodiac, though, is based on science, and it connects science with astrology. So it is physically accurate as well as being esoterically accurate as well. The true sidereal zodiac allows us to accurately assess stellar and planetary alignments, and I feel like it reveals a deeper identity for us. I understand that in spiritual circles, it's popular to dissolve our identity altogether and exist as some sort of a cosmic avatar. But before we can do that, we need to learn how to healthfully individuate. If we do not learn how to individuate properly, we are bound to make the same mistakes we made when we were living in a compromised sleeping state. We're going to make those mistakes in our spiritual endeavors if we do not learn to individuate first. This is so fundamentally important, and this is what I see a lot in spiritual circles. I see people going from basically loathing themselves and compromising themselves, and then they turn to spirituality and they end up in, some sort of a cult or some sort of a religion, or they start acting in a way where they're giving their power away, except now they're doing it with a higher voltage, and therefore they experience more pain and suffering because when they're playing with higher voltage, the consequences are greater. So I found that the true sidereal zodiac allows us to individuate to our full potential, whether you're using human design or you're using astrology or you're using it with my system, Trifecta. From there, we're in a position to better assess when and how we wish to dismantle this identity to move into the vast unknown, which lies beyond all identities. So you see, before we want to dismantle our identity, we should at least learn how to healthfully individuate. We should learn how to get all our needs met, fill our cup up, and then we can start talking about merging back into the absolute or the universal unified field. That way, we can actually assess what is right for us and what is not right for us. We can learn the art of self-love, setting boundaries, and effectively how to steer clear of situations that look good on the surface but are underlain with a hidden agenda, one that is often manipulative and one that often even spiritual people fall prey to. So it's really kind of harnessing your BS detector, harnessing your intuition at a very deep level. So effectively, the true sidereal zodiac can help us move into this identity where we get our needs met in a deeply fulfilling way. It forms a coordinate system for this reality, for a reality that ultimately feels like the version of ourselves that we are really striving to express in the world. And once we understand this blueprint, we can get excited, inspired even. And then we may ask ourselves, okay, I got the blueprint, this is dialed in, but how do I make this shift? How do I make this happen in my life today with 30, 40, 50, 60 years of compromise under my belt? And this is a question I hear a lot. One thing that happens with a lot of chart readings is that we can identify the blocks, the challenges, the trauma, the aspirations, but we're not given the practices and practical steps to implement them. I often hear, this reading is great, but how do I make it happen? And that's what kind of set me on a journey to figure out a way that I can actually make that happen. Because it's one thing to give people, advice based on my own experience, but I want to give something that's going to work for them. And it's going to work in a multitude of different scenarios because, as you probably know, everybody's a little bit different and everybody has their own unique needs. So just by identifying your optimal way of operating is a great first step. If you think about it, reflect on it, contemplate the themes that show up and personalize them, a part of your subconscious will begin to make this your lived reality. I call this quantum drifting because it's done passively and it's done slowly over time. But there still is the conditioning. And sometimes quantum drifting isn't really enough to get past the conditioning that usually resides in our blind spots. This conditioning causes inertia to change, meaning it resists change and it pulls us back into the gravity of our old self-identity and our own patterns. And sometimes there can be a pretty big gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And just trusting that your subconscious will guide you there and try to sort it out, this isn't really going to cut it. Now, is it? Also, the information contained in the chart is based on the fundamental archetypes of human life. These archetypes live in our genetics. So in order to access them and refine them and to work with them, we need to be operating on the same layer of reality in which they reside, and that is the quantum layer. I've talked about this as well, but the DNA that's at the center of every one of our cells, it's like a holographic imprint of our blueprint and how we evolve. Guess what? It isn't a physical thing. It's a liquid crystalline solution that actually has been found by science to exist between dimensions. In other words, scientists are pretty baffled by it, but they know that it kind of controls everything. So astrology, human design especially, gene keys, they're pointing to our genetics, our genes, and how we can, as conscious human beings with immense potential inside of us, actually epigenetically change what's written into our ancestry and our experience of the world. This is super cool. We've got all the requirements already inside of us. Here today, you don't need to buy anything. That's just marketing if they're telling you, you need this thing to become a better person. No, That's not true. You've already got it. Now, it's good to get help, coaching, readings. We help each other, sure. But you have to understand you already have the potential. Even if you have an illness, even if you have trauma, it doesn't matter. You have it inside of you to make this shift. But we've been conditioned to forget how, because let's face it, society can't exist in a hierarchy if everybody is empowered. So those at the top that are sort of benefiting by getting everybody to do labor for them, and slowly sucking life force out of the mass of humanity, the homogenized human population, they don't really want us to be empowered and living our destiny. They want us to be like sequestered into their reality and their idea of what we should be doing. And this, I think, is another one of those things that's a bigger discussion. So I'll save that for another time. Basically, what I'm saying here is that you've already got everything you need inside of you. And when you can actually believe that and start working with this and see the results for yourself, because it is an experiment and experience, belief is not enough. Faith is not enough. You need to actually experience the shift in order to really, really get it. That's why in astrology readings, advice like, if you move cities, or if you go out into nature more often, or you change your diet, these are like little superficial things, but they won't last in the long run, and they certainly won't go deep enough. They may be very good things, and they may arise naturally when you make the shift, but they're working at the surface level, not at the level of the root cause. That's why I found a very effective way to bend reality and make it happen by working at that root cause layer. It starts at a foundational level. So we got to go to the root, the foundation, and that is the quantum. Now, quantum is a fancy word that gets thrown around way too much these days, especially in the techie world and the new age world, and even the convergence of the techie and the new age world. But really, quantum is a very small space. It's working at the subatomic level where things behave weird. They don't abide by Newtonian physics anymore. Particles zip in and out of parallel dimensions like millions of times per second. And scientists are still scratching their heads with that one. Particles can even talk to each other instantaneously, which violates the speed limit of the universe, which is Einstein's theory of relativity, or stated in Einstein's theory of relativity, which says that nothing can move faster than the speed of light. Well, you can have two particles galaxies apart. One particle does something and the other one lights up instantaneously. So it definitely violates the speed limit of the universe. So therefore, much of our existing model of physics falls apart when we start to look at the subatomic level. But also, too, as Dr. Michio Kaku says, dimensions 4 through 11 are 150 millionth the size of a proton, and they're curled up inside of each atom. But they have the blueprint for how that atom behaves. So in other words, it's like the master computer that controls everything. It's just really, really, really small. It's like it's not very material, but it controls the evolution of the material realm. So in other words, energy precedes form. Think of the quantum layer as the blueprint layer. The blueprint held in your DNA that gives instructions on how your 30 trillion cells in the body build the body, how your hormones get released based on external stimuli, and how your neural network processes incoming information and filters out reality, or actually shows you the reality that you're meant to see. We have to accept at some level that there is a miswiring in our blueprint that causes external stimuli to result in an inappropriate response, especially if we've had trauma in our lives, especially if we've had a quote unquote hard life, or we feel like we're carrying a lot of burden. We have to just acknowledge, hey, maybe I inherited something that's miswired in my genetics, or maybe along my life, I made a few decisions that led to some sort of cross-wiring that isn't serving me in some way. Basically, what ends up happening with this is we respond inappropriately to life. So a response happens for an external stimuli that feeds our conditioned patterns that ends up perpetuating challenging cycles instead of moving us forward in the direction we want to go. And this response is so hardwired for us that we rarely catch it while it's happening. Instead, we become aware of it long after the trigger and the reaction has occurred. At this point, we're usually left with some degree of cleanup to address. Over time, our lives can start to feel like damage control, and we're putting out fires all the time, or else we try and fail and then eventually sort of slump down, lose hope, and start to feel like, we can't do anything, relegating ourselves to disappointment. And of course, the physical body does have limitations. So if the physical body is undergoing a lot of stress or dealing with putting out fires all the time, it's going to eventually break down and age faster than it needs to. So this is why the technique that I use and recommend for chart readings, and for anyone really, I mean, this is just good for anyone, but it's especially effective when you pair it with the ideal reality you want to create based on your chart. It's called quantum leaping. And quantum leaping is something that's been popularized in recent years. I know Mind Valley's talking about it. I've tried that program. It's okay. It's just kind of like for the everyday person. But my teacher actually taught me this years ago. And that's the version that I still use because honestly, it gets to the core. And I've even refined it based on astrology as well. So I've actually evolved this process because I felt at a personal level, it's not enough to give people an accurate chart reading. I want the tools that will actually help that become their lived reality. So I've sort of have my own take on quantum leaping, but the actual technique itself is extremely powerful because it resets things on a fundamental level and then allows the change or the correction to reshape all of the other levels. And I'm talking about the karmic level, the mental level, the emotional level, and then finally the physical level. I kid you not, I use this technique to clear up decades-long autoimmune disease within myself, one that had become very severe for me. I used to have psoriasis that went down my arms, my chest, my back, 80% of my upper body, and it burned. It was itchy all the time. It was flaky. And it basically, it was just really difficult to deal with. It made me ashamed of taking my shirt off in public, and I was always distracted with various itching or burning all over my body. So it was not a very pleasant way to be. And this lasted for a long time. So what I ended up doing about 4 or 5 years ago is I did a quantum leap for it. And I actually just corrected the genetic trigger that was causing it. And lo and behold, the next day, it started to clear up. Within a few days, it was gone and it never came back again. Now, I don't want to say it's cured, but that was 4 or 5 years ago and it's gone. It hasn't come back. And from being very severe to being non-existent shows me something happened. Another client of mine, basically, he had a chronic wrist injury and he had that again for a number of years. I think it was 10 or 12 years. And I was able to do a session with him and I did a quantum leaping process. And during the process, he actually immediately felt relief in his wrist. And then days later, he messaged me to say that the pain was completely gone. What I'm trying to say here is I'm not trying to say that this is a cure-all, but what I'm saying is that when you make shifts on the subtlest layer, the foundational layer, the quantum layer, it does have ramifications for the mental, the emotional, and even the physical layers. Working at this layer has shown me that physical changes can happen as a result of this work. And so quantum leaping basically works like this. This is the mechanics of it. So there are an infinite number of parallel realities out there. Quantum physics has acknowledged this. We've changed from a universe model to a multiverse model. We can see this at the subatomic level because we can't explain what's happening with electrons zipping in and out of different dimensions. We're assuming that they're moving between parallel realities. And that's scientifically. What they also postulate, and this is both theoretical physicists and also spiritual people as well, or people like myself who've had the practical experience of working with something like quantum leaping. So every time a possible outcome is collapsed into a discrete outcome, a new fork in realities appears. So another parallel world is born. As you can imagine, there's a lot of different possibilities happening to everybody and everything in the world. So every second, there are many, many, many parallel worlds being forked. In short, every time you make a decision, there is a duplicate world. Let's use an example. Let's say you're thinking about potentially studying in New York, or you also got accepted to a school in Paris. You think about this decision for a long time, and you decide to go to school in New York for one reason or another. While you're at school in New York, you end up meeting your life partner, and this trajectory in New York leads to a long string of future events that formulate who you are today. However, there's a whole different branch or trajectory of the version of you that went to Paris, and another chain of events followed that life. Perhaps you met a different life partner and chose a different career altogether. This happened as well. That's the crazy part, including all possibilities for decisions that followed along this trajectory. So every other decision point after making that main decision also happened. You can see here that you're only aware of one reality, the one that you made conscious decisions for that you walked out. And sometimes these decisions can lead to regrets. Sometimes they can lead to unintended negative consequences. Sometimes like injuries, accidents, breakups, whatever. So what if we end up thinking, what if I took that opportunity that I missed? What if I made this decision differently? Did I miss out on something? These are the things that often can plague people, but in truth, you didn't actually miss out. You can still meet the version of you that went to Paris and even gain all the skills and energy acquired along that trajectory. And therefore, we never actually miss out on an opportunity, which is a relief in a way. We simply don't know how to harness its potential. That's the only thing. So there's another version of us out there living that life that we're not in communication with. Not only that, but there's a version of you that has already broken free of your conditioning and is living in full alignment. This version is without the same burdens and struggles and challenges that you suffer from. There's a version of you that is healed and out there serving their purpose to the fullest. If you can imagine in an infinite number of parallel worlds, there's a version of you that did everything in alignment, right, and made no mistakes. And so you can still access that version of you. So use this to your advantage. You might not be able to physically go to this other world, but you can acquire its imprint, its energy, its rhythm. And when that happens, it starts the process of recreating those conditions in this world. Okay, so given that there are an infinite number of parallel worlds, it would take an eternity, literally, to visit all of them and try them on and see if they're good for you. So I do not recommend a trial and error approach to quantum leaping. I also do not recommend just diving into different realities based on mental ideas about what you need, because these mental ideas need to be checked. Often they're underlain by unmet childhood needs that end up becoming the desires of the adult version of you. But in the long run, they don't exactly serve you because they are rooted in mental fantasy, projection, and trauma. So a lot of the times, we don't need to basically go through a painful chain of life lessons just to basically open up and realize, oh yeah, I should have never gone there. That whole thing was just like underlain by like trauma and, unmet childhood needs. Why not just go to the destination that will serve us in the long run? I have found that understanding your chart of choice, and again, I've got my preference on this, but it's important that you feel into which one works for you, that gives you helpful insight into what you want to aspire towards and which areas you should focus on for healing. This could be your tropical zodiac, astrology chart, or human design. But in my experience, for me, I prefer the journey laid out in Trifecta, which is based upon the true sidereal system, because this is generally more favorable for people. And I've developed this in a way that addresses everything that needs to be addressed in the proper sequence. So the people who are drawn to my work also really resonate with this approach too. And I've done many, many readings to know that this does work. So the tropical zodiac will give you a version of yourself that's still connected to the earth layer of reality. And that does involve some level of conditioning of the human collective that lives on Earth and also the Earth's own destiny. The true sidereal allows you to step into a higher order of reality and realize your cosmic or stellar potential. It also reveals your core wounding that happened to you at a soul level, and also the path or purpose that you deeply wish to walk this lifetime. Now, we don't often only have one purpose. Some people do. Some people have a very fixed destiny, but that's not true of everyone. So by identifying the major life themes first and understanding how the shadow aspect or lower frequencies of these themes show up for you and hold you back is extremely important. But it's also even more important to know what the resolved version of these themes look like. So I'll give you an example. There's a genetic gate of ordering that allows you to structure things, that allows you to create consistency and continuity in your life. And at a lower frequency level, it shows up as chaos, and everything ends up being chaotic. You get caught in chaotic rage, or alternatively, you can become anal retentive and not actually move with nature. But at a resolve frequency, it's innovation. It's the ability to continually create structure and move and redefine yourself and the systems you create at higher orders of reality. So that's an example of how a theme of chaos can be resolved from its chaotic version or expression into one that truly serves the world and actually allows you to show up. So a lot of the times we think we have a problem or a wound. It's just that it's at the wrong frequency of its expression, and that when that frequency is raised, it can actually be a tremendous gift. We need the precise coordinates. When I say coordinates, I mean you need to flesh it out in detail and identify what that resolved version looks like for you, what you want it to be, what makes you feel alive inside of you. Because, you can chart it, but a chart's just a chart. It requires you to reflect on and personalize the information in a meaningful way. I always say the chart is like a diving board, but once you're in the air, you get to choose what you want to do. So the chart gets the process started. It kicks you off the diving board. But once you have looked at your chart and understood the major themes surrounding your wounding, life lessons, life purpose, how you attract prosperity, how you show up for other people, you start to get clear on how you work in your own unique expression and also what your potential might hold. This is when quantum jumping can really shine, because now there is only a few key leaps for you to make into parallel worlds that will yield incredible results. I'm all about efficiency. I don't want you to go on this endless quest of just jumping into random worlds. I'd rather say, which ones are going to be the biggest needle movers for you? Which ones are going to be the ones that sort things out and that you can just end up shifting into that ideal version of yourself as quickly as possible? So you're probably wondering, okay, this sounds great. So you're probably wondering, okay, what do I need to get started and how much does this cost? Because if this is as good as you say it is, Dave, it's got to be expensive. Well, the good news is you were born with the ability to do this. It's a basic human function that has simply been forgotten about in modern times, as we have preferred to rely on the five senses and ignore the subtle yet extremely important senses. This is done as a society. Again, I'm not going to get into this or why on this show. I'm just going to say that this is sort of the trend that I've seen. And I think a lot of people who gravitate towards spirituality do that because they know something's missing in society. These people are boring and they can only go by what the left side of their brain determines is real and factual. In my early 20s though, I didn't buy into that. I was in university for engineering of all things, which is extremely left brain, extremely materialistic. But that was also a time when I explored my wild side, and I ended up studying shamanic voyaging quite in depth. So I never called myself a shaman, but I love the processes that shamans used for voyaging, for healing, for finding answers, and making shifts out of the physical world. What I came to realize after studying with different organizations like the Foundation for Shamanic Studies out of San Francisco and a number of other people who had this ability kind of developed, is that this is actually a pretty basic human component that we all have as children. It's our imagination. But our imagination isn't just a fantasy world. Our imagination can actually be accessing the subconscious archetypes that live within all of us. And by doing so, it can present us with information that we would not have been able to acquire otherwise. That's, the basis for how a lot of the psychic phenomena work. Think about tarot cards. It's how do you walk in and pull out a card and just after shuffling it and randomly pull out the right card that means something to you in that moment? It's because your subconscious kind of knows where that card is in the deck. That's the cool thing. I've basically learned over the last 20 years how to use shamanic voyaging very powerfully. And so I've brought about my own healing through this. I've also been able to help many other people. I don't like, just associating it with the culture of it because, it can feel like cultural appropriation. But however, it's not bound to a certain culture. If you look throughout history, everybody used these techniques. We just happen to call them shamanic voyaging or creative voyaging in the modern world. But really, this is a basic human function. There's basically three parts to this type of journey, and quantum leaping is slightly different than shamanic journeying in some ways. However, it's close enough that they access the same apparatus, the same internal apparatus as each other. So to get started, you basically relax your body and bring your dominant brainwave state to an alpha or theta level, where it's relaxed, focused, and capable of creative visualization or sensing. The one thing I want to say is some people can't relax that deeply, especially if they don't have years of meditation experience. And that's why in shamanic voyaging, they usually use the drum. They go do, 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 do. Alternatively, some people use plant medicine, but I don't recommend that because it comes with a lot of parasitical energies and potential complications along the way. So if you're going to go down that path, you got to really know what you're doing. But the drum is very helpful because there's something called the frequency following response. So the drum, which is usually beat at like 6 or 7 hertz, actually entrains the brain into 6 or 7 hertz, which is nicely in that creative visualization alpha theta state. Alternatively, you don't need a drum. I often make soundscapes with binaural beats in them that does the exact same thing, and you don't need the drum. You can just put on a set of headphones and do that. Or if you are good at relaxing and you can consciously relax or have hypnosis experience, you might be able to get there as well. But I highly recommend using something that can help you relax, especially because if you're doing this regularly, you might have a day where you're stressed out and it's difficult to relax. So it's always good to have something that can help you get into that state of creative visualization. Now, when I say creative visualization, not everybody sees in their voyage. It's not always like clairvoyance. Many people simply get feelings or they hear messages. There's also people who smell things or taste things. There's literally all the 5 senses that we have externally. We also have internal versions of these senses as well. So the next thing we do once we're in that relaxed state is we begin to set an intention for the theme that we wish to work on or explore. And this basically then greatly reduces the number of parallel realities that we are going to visit into, basically finding the right one based on that intention. So this could be finding the answer to a particular problem. It could be healing a particular ailment that we're suffering from, or it could be aligning with your inner purpose or how to bring about more material prosperity and stability and financial abundance into your life. Whatever it is that you need, you can address through this process. So once the intention is set, you can trust that you'll voyage to the right parallel world where the issue is already addressed by this twin version of yourself. Finally, the third step is that you symbolically step through a door and enter into this parallel world. And at this point, you just kind of let your subconscious reveal what's there. Whether you believe your consciousness is actually going and journeying through the multiverse to some other parallel reality, or this is just a dialogue with your subconscious, it doesn't really matter. The result is the same. And if you're skeptical of this, or it sounds too fanciful, just try it and see what happens. Because, even modern psychology has recognized the power of the subconscious mind. And if you can dialogue with that alone can create great changes. I actually see this as going to a completely different reality, and I see it very creatively as I'm engaging with a different version of myself. So for me, I do feel like my conscious is actually voyaging through the multiverse. And same with, other people that I work with in this way. There are a couple steps that change at this point, depending on the theme and the desired outcome. But I generally recommend meeting and dialoguing with the twin version of yourself that you meet once you step through the door and you go on this journey. When you're dialoguing with them, you can get guidance, you can get advice from them. Like you might even hear them talking and telling you things and giving you helpful messages. Whatever it is, whether you just want to exist in that environment and kind of soak it up and observe, or if you want to be an active part of it, it's totally up to you. But I do recommend at the end that you actually walk into and merge with this alternate version of yourself so that you get a quantum imprint or snapshot of their rhythm and energy so that you can bring that back to your world and start to create with that rhythm or energy. It's like homeopathy in a way. It's like you get the essence of the perfected version, and that's enough to start to shift things on a cellular level in the reality that you're normally aware of. So after the journey ends, basically this is where I start to see a shift in the physical world. Now, it might not happen 2 minutes later. You'll probably feel better. I generally feel refreshed when I step out of a quantum leap. And then I just see what begins to change. I begin to see what opportunities. I usually get luckier in some way. And that's the thing that I look out for. And I got to say, you have to expect the unexpected to happen at this point and allow yourself to be pleasantly surprised. So quantum leaping in all is like a very powerful meditation slash manifestation tool for creating your ideal reality. The way that I work with it is I try to identify the most important themes, and I don't just make it mind candy to try to control a different version of reality. I actually use this to consciously voyage towards a more harmonious reality for myself and for the impact that I have on the collective. Now, Trifecta is something that came about unexpectedly and quite naturally for me. I was in a challenging situation and saw the vision of an incredible future. I was living in a retreat center in the rainforest of Vancouver Island, Canada. At the time, it seemed like, wow, this is a fantasy. It's a real stretch. And I knew such a place was going to be tens of millions of dollars that I didn't have. Well, there was another force at work. Within months of this vision, I founded, I don't know what you call it, the Trifecta system. And more recently, I actually signed the contract for this very retreat center that I saw on Vancouver Island. And it turns out there was even some more details that made it more perfect than I imagined. For instance, I thought it would be more remote. The location is actually very close to a major city, and it still has that real remoteness and that wilderness, and it's on the border of a national park. Like, it's really perfect. So this is a practical example of what can happen with quantum leaping. I'm humbled by this process and feel inspired to share it with you because it changed my life, and it's also changed many of my clients' lives as well in very unexpected ways. Trifecta is essentially a done-for-you map of the 9 key themes of your life. They're given to you, you just need to personalize them. It reveals where their blockages or challenges and also what the potential that these themes hold is. And so when you resolve them and you shift them on a fundamental level, what does that look like? So you can see that some of the challenging things that you're going through actually have very positive and beautiful expressions. Not only that, but I've created a specific set of quantum leaping processes for each theme. These are powerful soundscape meditations that use frequency-attuned soundscapes tuned to the frequency of each planet that represents the theme, uses binaural beats to help you relax and focus and get into the state of being where quantum leaping can happen. And then I'm using expert meditation scripts that I've developed over the last 20 years to really help you make that jump. So the way that I see it is the frequency of the soundscape, the music of it, works on an emotional level. The neural entrainment works on a nervous system or body level. And then the guidance in the track works at a mental level so you can actually focus your mind. So these quantum processes are next level, and especially when they're personalized through the lens of your chart. I don't mean to brag, but I gave it to a friend, and he said, this is better than 99% of the meditations out there. I then made a Facebook post, and I shared what my friend said, and somebody else tried it who was a 20-year meditator, and he came back and said, you're wrong. This is actually 99.9999999% better than the other meditations out there. So I know what I'm doing when it comes to making awesome meditations. Now, I could keep talking about these meditations, and I could keep tooting my own horn as to how great I think they are, but you could also just try them. I'm building an app right now where they're going to be stored so you can just access it on your phone. But in the meantime, I've actually got a link to in the description below to a place where you can find the first quantum leap that's just general that you can use for anything. And then I've actually got one for your collective wound, which you can also get a free collective wound reading. So you can actually get started with Trifecta and try the quantum leaping process with it, all for free, using a very nice mobile responsive page that will very soon be an actual mobile app for you. So I'm really giving you a very easy way and a very enjoyable way to make a powerful shift in your life. So like I said, you also get a reading of your collective wound based on your time of birth, so that you can fully personalize the experience and get the most out of it. So both of these are completely free to get started. Now, if you're vibing with what I'm talking about here, and you see the potential power of this approach, you may want more personalized support. And that's why, in this case, I've created a 3-month group program where we work intensively together to ensure that you receive personal support to help you fully integrate your own cosmic potential in terms of all of the themes held in your Trifecta True Sidereal chart. So there's a link below if you're curious and would like to know more information about that 3-month container. It does start in August, and I generally run about 2 of these per year. And also the space is limited because it's quite an intimate space and there's regular engagement with myself and the other people. And I really make sure that the people that I select for this are the right fit, because we're going to be a group of cosmic voyagers together in this process, creating a much more powerful and exponentially better future, not only for ourselves, but also for the people in our lives and our sense of service. So that's how basically I work. And if you want to get started and try this for free, please just click the link below, try out some of these quantum leaping meditations and get your personalized collective wound reading. They're really fun when they're paired together. You know, people were getting their collective wound reading, like, what do I do with these? I'm like, you just wait. I'm going to be releasing this really soon, and now it's ready for you to try. This quantum leaping meditation for the core wound will be free forever, as well as getting your collective wound reading. I think everybody should have access to that, especially in 2024, where, you know, the collective looks like it's going like this, you know, almost every other week. And, you know, people are pretty jangled by what's happening out there. Whether you try out my quantum leaping meditations or you are curious about the program or not, I think I've given you plenty of food for thought in this video to totally get started on your own. Some people just hear these words and know exactly what to do, but most people do need some additional support, and that's why I offer what I offer. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with those you know who might appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel, of course, because I've got a lot more exciting content planned on human design, astrology, gene keys, quantum leaping, meditations, the nature of reality, you name it, and how you can navigate these turbulent times as aligned as possible. Until next time.